Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We are so honored to have Dr. Feldberg here. I'm just going to do a brief introduction about you. Dr. Samuel Feldberg is a distinguished scholar with a profound experience in Middle Eastern and international affairs. Dr. Feldberg's illustrious career spans over 2 decades, marked by significant academic appointments, including serving as the academic director of Stand With Us Brazil and as a fellow of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies at Tel Aviv University. His extensive contributions to the field include several acclaimed book publications and numerous articles addressing critical issues such as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, international relations, and Holocaust studies. With fluency in multiple languages and a reputation as a sought-after analyst and commentator, Dr. Feldberg brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to his work. Currently engaged in groundbreaking research on topics ranging from asymmetric warfare to Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations. Dr. Feldberg continues to make invaluable contributions to our understanding of complex geopolitical dynamics. And I just learned that Dr. Feldberg is an avid hiker. And he is hiking all across the country, our country and Israel. So we are very excited to have you be here. I'm just going to make one other announcement before you begin, if it's okay. So thank you again for coming. Aside from having Dr. Feldberg here, and we are so honored, we as a community and in support of Israel, we have been very fortunate to have 2 survivors from Kfar Aza, and they are coming to speak in our community. They're going to be in Limbrook at Temple Amachad. This is happening on Sunday, March 17th at 5:00 p.m. And we have people, all of you who are here, we have flyers for you. It's also going to be in the HERJC happenings. It's also going to be on the Herald. I've been in touch with the Limburg East Rockaway Herald. So if you're part of that, it's going to be on their Facebook page. And we have flyers coming around the community, and we'd love for you to share this event because we feel very fortunate, but we're also very fortunate to hear what you have to say. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to your talk. Oh, I'm sorry. Also, we would like everybody to sign in. We're going to send around a sign-in sheet with a pen. If you can please sign in. Thank you.
For having me. It's a pleasure and a challenge always to talk to an audience that obviously is following what's going on. So my challenge is to bring you something new and something that you still don't know. Eventually, you will leave my presentation with more questions than you bring, but that's part of being an academic and trying to stimulate you to ask the proper questions. For many of them, there are no answers. I have been working very much on the subject of what's going on between Israel and its enemies. I don't call it only the war between Israel and Hamas. We will see that it is much more widespread than the conflict in Gaza. And we are facing a conflict that happens in different levels. Obviously, we have a ground level in Gaza and in the northern border of Israel, but we also have a conflict that is being waged in the media and in the hearts and minds of people around the world. You are obviously aware that it is subject also in American politics and influences the way the American government is relating to the conflict, because it influences the opinion of the voters. So we have political conflict going on, we have a military conflict going on, and we have a conflict that has to be won in the international media. Here you can see what that means to fight the conflict in the international media. All of these charges try to influence people that are interested in the conflict. You can show the conflict as terrorists using children to protect themselves. You can use the conflict, the images to show terrorists terrorizing both the Israeli and the Palestinian population. And you can use the conflict to show Israel's soldiers as heartless human beings that are that cannot make a difference between combatants and children. And when we look into the news and when we read the newspapers all over the world, and if you follow the New York Times or the Washington Post or a Spanish newspaper or a French newspaper, wherever you get the news, you will see contradictions. You will see points of view that generally are against the way Israel is waging this war. So I always bring it as an alert to audiences like you that we are engaged in a war to show the world that Israel is not committing genocide, Israel is not committing war crimes, and you just need to be aware of statistics of what is going on around the world to recognize that the war in Gaza is a war that has less civilian victims than any other conflict around the world. Look at what is happening in the Ukraine. Look at what is happening in Africa, in Congo, or many other countries. Look at what happened recently in Myanmar with the Rohingya minority there. These are examples of effective crimes against humanity, while the statistics of the Gaza war show that effectively there is a high number of civilian victims, but it cannot be compared in any way to other conflicts around the world. The Israeli army has to kill civilians because the Hamas is using them as shields. But if you take the statistics into account, the number of civilians killed for every terrorist that is killed is much smaller than what happens in any significant conflict in other places of the world. I bring world map to illustrate how difficult it is to find where Israel is on the map. Everybody's talking about the war in Gaza. Nobody knows where Gaza is. Nobody knows where Israel is. We are not talking about the educated population of the world that is an absolute minority. But if you go into the streets and you see people participating in protests against Israel, if you go and talk to them one by one, and I come from Brazil, so I can bring you the specific example of what happens in Brazil. We have a very controversial, small leftist party that is governing the country today, and they engage their voters in all kinds of protests, including protests against what is happening in Gaza. And when you go and you talk to the simple people that just barely make a living, they have no idea about what is going on, but they will shout that the Jews are committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. So this is part of the challenge of educating the people that feel sympathy for what they hear that is going on, but have absolutely no idea of what is happening. And the map illustrates exactly that. Most of the people that you will meet at protests around the world don't even know where Israel is. Even if you take a smaller scale map that shows only the Middle East, then also it will be difficult to pinpoint Israel and almost impossible to pinpoint where the Gaza Strip is. And still, it is on every major newspaper. It appears on the news practically every day. If you look into the international section of any significant newspaper around the world, you will see news about the war in Gaza every single day, and generally the news are what is shown there is very, very negative for Israel's and Jewish image around the world. A couple of items that I think it's important that when we engage in a discussion about what's going on in Gaza, that we should be able to inform people we are discussing it about, and it is generally not known at all. When people say that the Jews have stolen the Arab lands in Palestine, they are just using a slogan that has absolutely no basis. Palestine was instituted as a mandate by the League of Nations and included not only the territory between the sea and the river, but also all the territory that later was separated to create the Kingdom of Transjordan. So here in this map, you see what theoretically should have been the British mandate for Palestine that the League of Nations decided was going to be transformed into a Jewish homeland. And immediately afterwards, the Brits took out the largest part of it and created the Kingdom of Transjordan that later was transformed into the Jordan Kingdom. So when we hear that the Jews stole the land of the Arabs in order to create a Jewish state, first of all, we are talking about only 2/3 or 1/3 of the territory that was originally designed to create a Jewish state. And secondly, we are talking about lands that were purchased and not stolen, as everybody or most of the people like to say. The division of the territory is not something new. It's not something that happened in 1948. In 1937, there was already a proposition to separate Jews from Arabs living in this territory, and this was not accepted by the Arabs. In 1947, there was a partition proposal that was not accepted by the Arabs. And finally, after the War of Independence, one of the things that has to be always reminded to people we discuss with about the conflict is that the territories that are supposed to be the base of a Palestinian state, if it is ever created, are territories that in 1949 were controlled by Jordan and Egypt, not by Israel. And from 1949 until 1967, these territories, mostly Gaza Strip on the left lower corner, and the West Bank in the middle, were controlled by two Arab states that didn't allow a Palestinian state to be created. And only after the Six-Day War in 1967, this became a problem that involved also the state of Israel. So
the whole period of conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is a mix of the period when Israel, after Israel was created and the Palestinians became in part refugees and in part citizens of the state of Israel, and the later period when Israel effectively controlled Palestinians after the Six Day War. And these are spaces, it seems, that most of the public is not aware of and is not interested in including in the discussion. Here is what the war is about. A small piece of land that was surrounded by Jewish communities that were established since before 1948, so before the creation of Israel, there were already Jewish communities in this yellow area around the Gaza Strip, and the tragedy of this conflict, or of this phase of the conflict, because this is only the last phase of the conflict that has been fought for decades. The tragedy, or the biggest tragedy of this conflict, I may say, is the fact that the communities that were attacked next to the Gaza Strip were inhabited by those people that were the staunch supporters of the two-state solution. People who were dedicated to improve the conditions of the Palestinians. If you Google, you can find interviews with survivors of the massacre that were engaged in taking Palestinian children from the Gaza Strip to hospitals in Israel to get treatment on a regular basis. The Palestinians from the Gaza Strip were the main agricultural workers in these communities adjacent to the border. So what I have been saying since the 7th of October is that the Second Intifada made the Israeli left much less capable of defending its positions favorable to an agreement with the Palestinians, and the 7th of October has destroyed any kind of expectation in that sense. And I will show you the statistics that demonstrate how Israeli society has been changing and effectively changed after the 7th of October. This is just to give you a sense of what happens in the Gaza Strip. We all heard accusations against Israel saying that the Gaza Strip is the largest open prison in the world. I don't know how familiar you are with a prison system. Fortunately, none of us probably has been in a prison, but every time a cellular phone goes into a prison anywhere in the world, that becomes a scandal. The police is being accused of leniency and or not doing their job properly. The Gaza Strip is home to cities with all kinds of levels of society in that territory, and not only the people in Gaza, part of the people in Gaza have a decent life, but also if we hear about all the means that were used to attack Israel on the 7th of October, we have to at least ask the question, how come all the materials necessary to produce those armaments were introduced into an open prison? And how come so many kilometers, miles, hundreds of miles of tunnels were constructed in an area where it is impossible to bring anything because the area is controlled as a prison by Israel? So it's again, going back to the first slide I showed you, we are talking about propaganda war that brings information that people are ready to accept without thinking about. There is no logic in the argument that Gaza is an open prison. If you look at pictures of the houses and the buildings and the infrastructure that there is in Gaza, you will see that people live a relatively normal life. Obviously, there are poor people, there are miserable people, but there are poor people in Brazil and in East Asia as well. The poor people in Gaza up to the 6th of October didn't have a life of a lower level than the poor people in Pakistan or in other poor countries in East Asia or in South America. So whoever is interested in finding out what really was going on in Gaza had the information available. And here you can see the three main areas of occupation where cities are built in Gaza, in the north, in the center, and in the south. And you can see a lot of empty space that was used for agricultural purposes. So also the idea that the density of population in Gaza is horrible and it's above anything that we can imagine all over the world is also not correct. Singapore has a much denser level of concentration of population than happens in the Gaza Strip. And here you can see what the Hamas has done in the subterraneans of Gaza. How Hamas has built a complex of 500 miles of tunnels. 500 miles of tunnels. I did a quick calculation to try to figure out what that represents. That would represent 80,000 20-ton trucks digging tunnels underneath Gaza. 80,000 trucks. So how come a piece of land where nothing comes in and nothing goes out, where people cannot make a living, manage to build such a network of tunnels? And this network of tunnels was not built in order to protect the citizens from an aerial attack. It was built to guarantee that the terrorists and the leadership of Hamas have where to find shelter whenever 7th of October happens, because nobody woke up on the 6th of October and said, let's attack Israel tomorrow. This has been planned for many years, and this is part of the structure that was prepared because they knew what was coming as a reply. And after the Israelis decided to retaliate, these tunnels were needed both to keep the hostages, which are there until this day, and to guarantee that the leadership and the remaining terrorists in the south of Gaza can find shelter before the war ends. And we will discuss in a moment what does it mean to try to come to an end of this war. This is the area this shows how far the Palestinians went on the attack of the 7th of October. So it's for the proportion of Israeli territory, it's a huge area. So nobody in Israel could imagine that a terrorist force or an enemy could breach the border and advance so much. And this is also one of the reasons why it took so long to react to this attack. They attacked all over the border. Nobody knew what is happening. nobody knew how to effectively react. The Israeli military were prepared for breaches on the border. They have trained for that over the years, but for nothing of this scale. And as it happens in Israel over the years, it happened in the Yom Kippur War, and it happened in the 2006 conflict in Lebanon. Somebody will be accountable for that. There will be investigations. The government will pay its price, but it's still too early. And one of the discussions that we find in the Israeli society is between those who say this should happen right now, and all those who say we have a war to be waged, and when the war ends, then we will see who has to be accountable for what happened. Speaking about Hamas capacity and what they have built in this so-called open-air prison, look at the ranges of the rockets that they have built over the years. And we are not talking about decades. Hamas took power in the Gaza Strip in 2007. Until 2005, between the Oslo agreements of 1993 and 2005, the Gaza Strip was governed like the West Bank by the Palestinian Authority. In 2005, the Israelis left the Gaza Strip, both the settlers that lived there since 1967 and army and security forces. And 2 years after that, Hamas took power. After they won an election, they expelled the Palestinian Authority and started building an arsenal that includes all the missiles that you can see here. Over the years, there was an improvement in their capacity. At the beginning, they were launching mortars just over the border. So those communities that lived really close to the border were the ones who suffered that impact. But over the years, they have improved their capacity, and that means mortars of longer range, and that means rockets that are ballistic. The difference between a rocket and a missile is that the rocket has a ballistic capacity, so it goes up and comes down, and any system can calculate where the impact will be. And missiles are the most developed stage of this process, where an artifact could be directed specifically to a target, and these are the most dangerous ones and the most difficult to engage when we consider that Israel has a very sophisticated system that can calculate where the rockets are going to land. So when you see the pictures that show arrowheads destroying the missiles or rockets that have been launched against Israel, that's mainly a matter of computer science, not of rocketry. So when a rocket is launched, the computer calculates what is the probability of that rocket hitting a populational center, an inhabited area. If it is reaching an inhabited area, then a missile is launched to down that rocket. If it is going to land in a field, or if it's going to land in the sea, then nothing is done. Also, for an economic reason, it's very expensive to bring a rocket down. So if for every rocket that Hamas has launched, the Israelis would launch a missile to try to down it, they will be out of missiles very quickly. So the brains behind the whole system that protects the Israeli population is based on computer technology and not in rocket science. Here you can see what happened along the last 5 months. The Israelis have dislocated the population from the north of Gaza and then from the center of Gaza, brought them to the south, to the area of the Egyptian border, and the Israeli military has basically cleaned the area of most of Hamas terrorists. So those who follow the news know that they had to fight block by block war against the terrorists after the civilian population was dislocated. Whoever remained in the area was considered a combatant and a terrorist, and this is what the Israeli army has done over the last 5 months. First bombed the whole area, and then had to engage in very close quarters combats because the terrorists were either in the remaining debris of the building or underneath in the tunnels that they have prepared for it. And therefore, we will also see the statistic. It is a costly war for the Israeli army. Every day we hear about soldiers that fall in this moments. Here, I hope you can see the difference. This is a picture from 2 months after the beginning of the conflict, when Israel was cleaning the area in the center of the Gaza Strip, or south of the north of the Gaza Strip. On the left side, you can see how the area was totally built before the Israeli attacks, and on the right you can see how the Israeli Air Force and artillery have practically destroyed all these areas that have been emptied of the civilian population. So the idea was effectively to guarantee that no population remains there, because it is very difficult to find the difference between the civilian and the terrorist engaged in military activities. And this is not something that the Israelis have invented, or a problem that the Israelis have faced on their own only. If we look at what happened in Afghanistan after 9/11, if we look at what happened in Iraq in 2003, Americans and international forces had to face exactly the same problem, and they dealt with the problem exactly in the same way. First, very heavy aerial and artillery bombardment, and then boots on the ground to clean the remaining combatants. Another couple of pictures. Look up on the left. You couldn't say, from what we hear in the media, that the Gaza Strip, this seashore on the Gaza Strip, look like the picture on the upper left corner. It looks like a seaside resort anywhere in the world. So the engagement to eliminate the Hamas terrorists had to deal with places where their families were living, and in many cases, the Hamas terrorists didn't allow the civilians to live, and this is mostly what brought the number of civilian victims to the level that we see on an everyday basis. Now let's look at some statistics on both sides. Here we have from numbers from today. How many Israelis have been killed? How many soldiers have been killed? We still have 134 Israeli hostages out of 240 that have been kidnapped. But one thing that most people don't hear about is how many Israelis have been dislocated from their houses. There are more than 120,000 people that have been living outside their houses for 5 months. Multiply it by 30, you have the equivalent of what would have been here in the United States. So we are talking about 3.5 million Americans that would be internal refugees in the United States. You never had a situation like that. No country in the world that is not facing total war has seen this kind of situation over the last decades. We can compare it to what has happened in Syria, in the civil war over the last 12 years. But no Western country in the world has faced that practically since the Second World War. So nobody's talking about it, nobody's noticing that is happening. This is significantly affecting the Israeli economy. We have people that are out of their jobs. The government has to pay for these people to stay in hotels around the country. There is an increase of 10% in the Israeli deficit in the last 5 months, and it is the population that has to pay for that in the end. It costs the taxpayer to generate this revenue that the government is using to pay for accommodation and for salaries that are paid to people that cannot produce. We are talking about a huge engagement of reservists in the army. We have almost 300,000 reservists that are engaged in this conflict for 5 months. Again, multiplied by 30, it's equivalent. Imagine 9 million Americans being called for reserve duty on top of the regular army. They have to get financial compensation. They are risking their lives every day, and their families are exposed to both to the risk of their beloved one being killed in Gaza. There are a lot of injured people that return and cannot live a regular life. They will never live a regular life in the future. Not all are bad news. We have good news when we look at how Israel is reacting to this situation. In the north, we also don't hear very much about it abroad, but there is an attrition war being fought against Hezbollah. They are launching the rockets and missiles against Israel. The whole border, it's also empty of population on both sides of the border. The Israelis have retrieved their population from the northern border, and the Lebanese have fled because they know there is going to be an Israeli retaliation. But Hezbollah has been sending rockets against Israeli territory since the beginning of the war, and Israel has retaliated. It attacked 4,500 targets all over the border of Lebanon. Yesterday, target was attacked over 100 kilometers far from the border. So this is a new escalation that will certainly bring a response from Hezbollah. The first response was a launching of 100 rockets yesterday against Israeli targets. But Hezbollah has paid a price. Terrorists have been killed, among them at least 5 of their commanders in the field, and 750, or the estimate is that at least 750 terrorists of Hezbollah has also been severely injured in this conflict. Here you can see all the border area that was evacuated by Israel. So imagine that, to make a parallel with the States, imagine that the whole border with Canada, with a depth of 15 or 20 miles, would be emptied of population. The whole border across the United States. This is what happened in the north of Israel. So people who lives in cities, people who lives in farms, all the people that lives in kibbutzim and in moshavim, all the economic activity that has to be interrupted. So there's a huge impact not only on the economy, but in society as a whole. All these people are dislocated and have been living for 5 months somewhere else. Their children have to find a new school to go to. There people who cannot work remotely are out of a job, and this has an impact on the whole of society. Speaking about other aspects of this war. So as I told you, we have a war on the ground going on in Gaza. We have a war of attrition going on the north. But over the last months, the Yemen Houthis, which is a Shia minority that controls part of Yemen and is considered a tool of the Iranians, they have been attacking Israel with drones and rockets. So the city of Eilat in the south of Israel have been a target of these Houthis, drones and rockets, and they have been attacking shipping in the Red Sea that in a sense are vessels that are being targeted because supposedly they could bring cargo to Israel, but it has affected practically the whole of shipping in the Red Sea, and that impacts the economy all over the area, including Europe and Asia. Here you can see how these terrorists have attacked prior to the war. They have also been engaged in a war that is considered a Middle East Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So the Houthis, as allies of Iran, target whatever can be associated with Western interests. They have attacked refineries in Saudi Arabia. They have attacked American forces both in Iraq and in the Red Sea, and have escalated this war using the argument that they are engaged to support the Hamas cause in the Gaza Strip. When the Houthis or Hamas or Hezbollah launch rockets against Israel, that disrupts the life of the population on a daily basis. Here you have a number that I took care to make the calculation to find out what that represents for the everyday life of any citizen. So along the last 5 months, the number of times there was an alarm telling people to go to a shelter represents 3 runs per hour over the last 5 months. So imagine, how can you run your life? How can you go on with your daily life if all the time, obviously this, the statistics there show that it has, that it has been much more at the beginning of the war, because if the Israeli army advanced into Gaza, they have eliminated launching sites, and the launching sites have been concentrated in the south. So if Hamas is launching rockets from the center and from the north of the Gaza Strip, they have a range that is much that it much covers a bigger part of Israeli territory. As they are pushed down, the range of the range of the rockets diminishes, and the number of the rockets diminish. But over the first months of the war, there was a huge impact in the day-to-day life. I arrived, just to give you a personal example, I arrived in Israel on at the beginning of December on a Monday, and on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, the sirens were blaring, and I was theoretically supposed to run to a shelter. The new buildings in Israel have what's called a secure room. So one of the rooms in the house or in the apartment are supposedly secure against a rocket attack. But whoever doesn't have that has to run into the basement or try to find a shelter, a public shelter in the street. And as you go farther from the border of the Gaza Strip, you get more time to do that. I have a friend who lives near the university in Tel Aviv, which is relatively safe. So when you hear the alarm, you have about 2 minutes to go to a shelter. And she broke her leg trying to bring her daughter, her small daughter, into the shelter. She was running so desperately that she broke her leg. And that's how people feel every single day when the alarm sounds, because a rocket, and that means that the rocket is coming into the populated area. It doesn't mean that the rocket has been launched by Hamas from the Gaza Strip, because most of the rockets could land in an empty area, could land in the sea. When the siren blasts, is because it is coming into that area, and you know that it's going to hit the populated area, or it is going to be neutralized by the Iron Dome. Here you can see what it means for international commerce, the effect of the war. Since boats cannot anymore go safely through the Red Sea, they have to go around Africa. It takes 2 times or 3 times more. It costs a lot. It increases the price of insurance, increases the cost of every product that comes from Asia to Europe or to the Middle East itself. But not everything is negative news. One of the effects of these wars, of both the war against Hamas and the war against Hezbollah, is that there is an addition to the benefits of what was called the Abraham Accords. So when Israel normalized its relations with the countries of the Gulf, there has been an enormous increase in the commercial relations between Israel and the Arabs. Before the war, there was an expectation that there will be a normalization also of the relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This is on hold for now, but the interests are still there. All these countries realize the potential of relations with Israel. And what has happened is that this disruption of silos have accelerated the creation of a land route that ties the Gulf to the Mediterranean. So what was expected to be a long-term benefit of these relations between Gulf countries and Israel materialized almost instantly when the cost of transporting goods through the Red Sea increased significantly or simply became impossible because insurance companies were not ready anymore to insure cargo that went that way. So to think about anything positive that can come out of this is it means that it is also possible. One of the very negative aspects of this conflict is the fact that Egypt, who is a country who has a peace deal with Israel that has been standing for many decades, and is one of the poorest countries of the region, has lost revenue from sea merchant traffic through the Suez Canal. So Egypt used to collect $4 billion in fees for ships that transit through the Suez Canal. They have lost most of it, and that means a huge deficit that represents practically the cost of importing wheat for the poor population in Egypt. Egypt is the largest importer of wheat in the world, and being a poor country, a country that suffers from the impact of having to feed its population out of imported grain, not only the cost of grain went up because of the war in Ukraine, but also Egypt lost most of the revenue that it used for those imports. So the good news again is this week the International Monetary Fund approved a credit of $8 billion to Egypt, which will cover 2 years of wheat imports. Maybe that will give them a solution for the short term, and eventually the war will not last that much. Here are a couple of other statistics just showing where the Americans have been involved in this war. You may have heard that the United States was planning to a retreat from the Middle East, or from direct involvement in the Middle East, especially after President Trump took American troops out of Afghanistan. There was a plan to take troops out of Iraq as well. This war has brought the Americans back into it, and all these points you can see on the map means attacks against American troops, both in Iraq and in Syria. In Syria, the Americans have been engaged mostly in protecting the minorities since the period of the confrontation with ISIS, and the troops are still there and are being attacked by Iranian allies. Coming to the end, we have to look into other aspects that are not directly linked to what happens in Gaza, but have a relation to it. There has been a significant increase in terrorist attacks or perceived terrorist attacks in the West Bank. Hamas has all the interest in making the situation or in complicating the relationship between the population of the West Bank and the Israeli authorities. There is a conflict going on between settlers in the West Bank and the Palestinian population. That's subject eventually for another conversation. And the security forces have been very active trying to eliminate hostile operations in the West Bank, And here you can see, since the 7th of October, there have been at least 731 episodes in which the Israelis tried to advance terrorist action by Palestinian militants in the West Bank. A lot of these activists have been arrested. Several of them have been killed, and this only heightens tensions between the civilians in the West Bank and Palestinian and Israeli security forces, and that's a combination of what is happening in the West Bank and the war that is going on in Gaza has changed significantly the proportion of Israelis that believe there is a solution to the Palestinian problem. So you can see since 2015, there was a significant shift in the position of the majority of the Israeli population. If 10 years ago, the majority of the Israeli population would support the eventual creation of a Palestinian state besides Israel, if it was possible to negotiate a peace agreement with the Palestinians. After the 7th of October, there was a total reversal. Most of the Israelis today don't believe there could be a solution like that. And what would happen is continuation of the conflict on a lower level. Most of the Israelis don't believe the Gaza Strip should be occupied by Israel, that the military should control the Gaza Strip, but they believe that there should be the capacity to guarantee that no other attack like the 7th of October would occur in the future. There are a lot of surveys looking into the relations between Arab citizens of Israel and the Jewish population. There is a very interesting relation between the numbers of what happened in 2021, when there was a flare of violence of Arabs in Israel against their Jewish neighbors, and what didn't happen after the 7th of October. And the answer is, or the probable answer is, the Arab citizens of Israel were horrified by what happened on the 7th of October. They realized that they could also be victims of what happened, and there has been very little expression of any kind of positioning by the Arab population, especially by leaders that have been hostile in the past, including Arab members of parliament. But the feeling is this: the Jewish population is feeling much more threatened and vulnerable to the mix of Arab Jewish population in Israeli society. This illustrates, again, it's not the focus of our conversation today, but this illustrates how countries around the world are reacting to the war. In red, you have countries that are supporting the Palestinians. In blue, you have countries that support Israel. And in gray, you have a mix of them. Unfortunately, most countries around the world, also in terms of government position and also in terms of public opinion, are supporting Hamas. And if you look into what is being published along the last 2 months at least, we practically don't hear anything about the 7th of October. So it's like only the Palestinians are being targeted by Israeli forces, and nothing happened before that. Something we have to deal with. another reflection of this situation is the fact that the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip has to be fed. Somehow, this presents a challenge to the Israeli authorities because any ship or any truck that comes into the Gaza Strip could bring also material that could be used for Hamas. Even when food comes into the Gaza Strip, there must be some kind of control that guarantees that this food is not landing in the hands of Hamas, that will use these resources in order to secure their position and strengthen their position. So a famous Spanish chef organized a rescue operation that is bringing a ship with food and resources to Gaza. It is being controlled. It went to Cyprus first to be checked, and now it's on its way to the Gaza Strip. And this is part of an effort that has been promoted by the US to build a temporary port on the Gaza Strip, a floating port on the Gaza Strip that will enable this kind of solution to become a permanent solution for the next months, to guarantee that resources can be checked in Cyprus and then arrive in the Gaza Strip and be directed to the population itself without involvement of Hamas. What we know today is that we are in a kind of a limbo. There is a lot of pressure to go into the remaining of the Gaza Strip, where Hamas terrorists and leadership are still hiding. That is a complicated situation because most of the population that has been dislocated from the north and the center are now human shields for this remaining terrorists of Hamas. The hostages are probably in the tunnels in the same area in the south of the Gaza Strip on the border of Egypt. The Egyptians are very worried that there will be a stampede of civilians across the border that either they could not control or they will have to shoot at them to control it. None of them is a good solution. So nobody can predict what will happen over the next weeks. There are negotiations, ongoing negotiations regarding the possible liberation of part of the hostages. That depends on Hamas accepting a partial ceasefire and not a definite ceasefire, because Israel will not accept interrupting the war without the possibility of eliminating the military capacity of Hamas. And as I mentioned to you, there is an election going on in the US, and if you look into all the discussions regarding the position of the American government on the war in Gaza, this is part of the ongoing discussion. I don't think anybody could say what effect that will have on Biden's campaign, or how much Trump would benefit from what is perceived as his support for a more radical position on the side of the Israelis. I would have 2 hours more to comment to you on what's going on, but I think we had enough time, and I hope you have a lot of questions. Thank you very much. You want to pass the microphone? Questions?
Not exactly a question. You spoke earlier about the displaced Israelis and how that was one of the lesser known aspects. I feel compelled to add a little bit to that. During the first week of February, I was part of a solidarity mission to Israel with an itinerary that would take the entire evening to review. But one of the groups we met with were three women who lived right along the border of Lebanon. In fact, they said that in the morning when they opened their shades, the Hezbollah folks could see what they were having for breakfast. And they talked about the displacement and living in hotels. Each of the three women had sons in the army, with younger children, exactly as you stated, trying to find schools for them for activities, living in hotel rooms, their husbands unseen for 5 months because they were working in the north. One of them was a chef in a restaurant. The restaurant's closed, but now he's cooking for the army. And so a horrible situation. They were exiled with the clothes on their back, literally, and everything that they have today is through donations. But the point that I want to make in seconding what you commented on about the unknown is at the end of their presentation and discussion with us, we asked, what can we do? What can we do for you? And all 30 people, all 30 of us had our hands on our wallet, ready to hand over a little cash. And what they said, what you can do is just make sure the world knows about us. We are the unknown. People have empathy for the soldiers, for the wounded, for the hostages, etc. The world doesn't know about us, how we're suffering. And so I appreciate what you said. I just thought I wanted to emphasize that a little further on their behalf.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I would add to that, the answer to what could be done is voluntary work. There are missions going to Israel not only to find out what's going on, but a lot of people going there to help. All these areas that have been evacuated are mostly agricultural areas where people need workforce to help them harvest and plant. And I spent almost 3 months in Israel and went every week, sometimes twice a week, to one of those communities to help them survive. And it will take some time. Foreign workers will come back. They will go back to the places where they live. But there is a period when they need physical support, and there is no money that can compensate for it.
I have two questions, if you'll permit me. Number one, with the sophistication of the seismic equipment and the sophistication of the tunnel system, was Israel asleep at the wheel?
Was Israel?
Were they asleep at the wheel with regards to the extent of the tunnel system that was in Gaza?
It's a question that is going to be answered by an investigation committee after the war. It is really the analysts cannot understand why that was a surprise, because they knew tunnels are being done. They knew what the tunnels are for, but they were not prepared to deal with it, and they have not dealt with it all over these years. It was not supposed. It was not supposed to be a casus belli. So, if an area is governed by an entity like it was by Hamas over all these years, the governments of Israel along this period have not considered the digging of tunnels reason for engaging in a war against Hamas. Every time there was an attack by Hamas along the last decade, so the last big one was in 2014, the last small one was in 2021. Israel went in, destroyed some of their capacity, guaranteed that there will be silence for a couple of months or a couple of years, and that's it. There was no engagement on the ground to eliminate the tunnels. I don't have an answer for why, and I don't think anybody outside of the government could answer that.
My second question is, why are we losing the propaganda war for years? This is nothing new, that Israel is losing the propaganda war.
It's an almost impossible question to answer. My personal answer to that is anti-Semitism. When Jews hit back, that doesn't sound good. So there is maybe another answer that I would raise. The problem may be that we are facing both the right and the left. Historical anti-Semitism was a phenomenon produced by the right. Fascists were anti-Semites. Over the years, after the disappearance of the Soviet Union, the left has lost its cause, and the underdog has become the main reason for the left to exist. So the left has become anti-Israeli as well. So now we are facing in the middle both the right that is anti-Semitic, historically anti-Semitic, and the left that is, let's call it anti-Zionist, which is a new version of anti-Semitism. So maybe it's just because we're caught in the middle, and there is no effort that we can do that will solve the problem. We are doing all we can. I work with Stan. I don't know if you are familiar with an institution called Stand With Us. I work with Stand With Us in Brazil, and we have worked endless hours over the last months to try to show the Brazilian ignorant public that Israel is not committing genocide. As simple as that. And it is difficult because they say you're killing women and children for no reason.
I've read a number of articles about what is Palestine and where did Palestine come from and what are these Palestinian people. And I still don't understand it. And I was wondering if you could give me your opinion on was there ever a Palestine, a country of Palestine?
I will give you a short answer. Palestine is a concept, it's not the name of a country. The concept was created by the Romans that wanted to separate the idea of Judea after the Jews were expelled in the rebellion against the Romans. So we are talking 2,000 years ago. So the concept of the term Palestine is a Roman concept. Jerusalem was called Area Capitolina, and Judea was transformed into Palestine, which was also a kind of an offense because the term Palestine comes from Philistines, which were the biblical enemies of the Jewish people. And then the region was controlled by whatever empires were in the region until the Ottoman Empire. During the Ottoman Empire, the region that is later called Palestine was just an administrative area of the Ottoman Empire. And when the Brits conquered the area in the First World War, the League of Nations designed the term Palestine for what I showed you in the map. The area between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, plus the area where Transjordan was created. And since then, it was called Palestine until the creation of the State of Israel, which generated the division of that area between Israel, Jordan, and Egypt that occupied the Gaza Strip. So Palestine has never been a country. And Palestinian people is a term that refers to those Arabs that were not citizens of any of the states that were created after the First World War. So whoever was not Lebanese, Syrian, Iraqi, Saudi, or Egyptian was a Palestinian, including the Jews. But most of the people don't want to even think about it.
Thank you.
Even this war undeniably extended the political life.
I can't hear you.
Close to the mic. I think that this war extends the political life of the current government, right? And I think that the population right now, I would assume, they are not supporting the new government. So what are the likely outcomes you see in 1, 3, 5 years?
5 years, we need a crystal ball, and that's very rare these days. The actual polls show that if there were elections today, the opposition would get 74 seats in the Israeli parliament, which is an absolute majority, about 20% more than the current government has now. And it would be much more diverse, because this government is composed basically of right-wing, extreme right-wing, and Orthodox parties, and the opposition is very much diverse, including right, center, left, and the Arab, at least one Arab party. So we can only imagine that whenever this war ends, there will be an election, and the opposition will win the election. But historically, Israeli governments have been short. So in 5 years, you may have 2 or 3 governments turning over between right, left, and middle. And I remind you that most of the left in Israel is gone. So when we talk about left today in Israel, we are talking about maximum about center left. There is the Labour Party is something of that remains in fashion.
The New York Times anti-Semitic.
Sorry?
Is the New York Times anti-Semitic?
No. They could be worse than they are.
So if I was in charge of Israeli Hezbollah, I would be making sure that almost that a majority of people representing Israel around the world, say to news outlets, the media, would be Ethiopian Israelis, Arab Israelis, Druze Israelis, Mizrahi Israelis. I don't see that. Do you think that is because the people in charge of Hezbollah don't see the value in that, or is it that they're just so busy putting out fires and fighting the actual war that they don't have the resources to do that or even think that way?
I have the feeling that the Israel government think it's a lost battle, and they don't engage in it. The personal example I can give you is that we have done in Brazil the work that the government should have done. We didn't hear the Israeli ambassador or the Israeli consul in São Paulo for all these months of war. They were not in the media. They were not expressing themselves. They were not engaging. So I don't know. Maybe they don't think it's worth it. They don't have a budget. Well, I once heard from an official of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that their budget, everybody knows what is cottage cheese in Israel?
Yeah.
Okay, that the budget, the propaganda budget for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is smaller than the propaganda budget for cottage in Israel. So it gives a measure of how important they think that is. And cottage cheese doesn't need a lot of advertising in Israel because everybody eats it without advertising. That's it.
Anyone on Zoom?
Anyone on Zoom have a question?
Maybe Carol will say thank you to analogy. And to Marvin for the extraordinary sound. Thank you, Marvin, for this sound. Thank you so much. Really great. I'm sorry, Lisa, for coming back. You heard me to help us out. Thank you so much. And Bernard and everyone. Keith. Okay, I'm going to say.